Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today, Masechtas Kiddushin daf Nun. We are going to begin on the bottom of page Mem Tes Amud Beis, and we are going to begin by the new Mishnah. It says, "Mastis Almanas Shani Kayin." I want to marry you, but I want to tell you it's only on condition that I'm a Kohen. Turns out Benim's a Levi. She's not a Kohen. Or Levi Benim's a Kohen. If he says on condition that I'm a Nisin, namely that I come from the Givonim, Benimsa Mamzer, which seems a lot worse, or Mamzer Benimsa Nisin. If he says Ben Ir Benimsa Ben Krach, he says, I am someone I'm a city guy. It turns out he's in a village. Ben Krach Benimsa Ben Ir. So if we look at Rashi really quick, Yeshivas Krachim Kasha. It's hard to live over there. Shekrachu Makam Shvakim. When it comes to a Krach, there's a lot of marketplaces. There's so many people coming around. The other way around, so it's interesting. Apparently it's better to live like in the suburbs. So on condition that, marry me, I'm really close to a bathhouse. It's like, wow, that'll do it. It turns out it's far away. Maybe it's not so good to be so close to a bathhouse. The people that frequent there, maybe the smells. Bas, we had this before. On condition I have a daughter, or Shivcha Megudeles, as we saw before. What does Megudeles mean? It doesn't mean she's an adult, and therefore she can serve you, and therefore it's like a kiss of Shvach Mamoin, or is that she's a Isha Chashuva, and therefore it's considered Shvach Yochasin. Ve'enlo, O almanash she'enlo v'yeshlo. It's like unconditioned marry me. No, I have no kids from my previous marriage. And it turns out he does. That's a big problem. Almanash she'enlo banim v'yeshlo. On condition I don't have kids, he does. Well, almanash she'yeshlo v'enlo u'v'kulam. And in all these cases, here's the key line. Afal b'sham, even though she says, believe me, I still want to marry the guy. I don't care what he said. It doesn't matter what the condition is. It's not good. And so too if she deceives him. So it doesn't make a difference what she says or what he says. That she's, don't worry about it. It's not a good Kiddushin. So obviously on a practical level, what you could just do is obviously he can be Mekadesher again. The nafkamina is what if she was Mekadesh, someone's a Mekadesh in the middle, that's where it becomes problematic. Says the Gemara. Gemara begins with a story. Hahu Gavra. There was a person, the Zavan Lenechasei Adaita Umeisek Eretz Yisrael. His intention was to sell his house, his possessions, because he was living in Chutz La'aretz. He wanted to move to Eretz Yisrael. Good for him. In the Zavin, Lo Amar Lo Midi. However, when he sold the house, he didn't make that stipulation. Amar Rava, and then for whatever reason, he ended up not going. So Havi Devar. So he's saying Havi Devar Shabalev, but Devar Shabalev in a Devarim. These are considered matters that are inside your heart, inside your mind, and it doesn't mean anything. Devar Shabalev in a Devarim. You actually have to speak up what you're thinking. We're not mind readers here. So therefore, the reality is, it's still a valid sale. So minhani mili. So how do we know this? Minoli l'rava ha. How do we know that this is the din? How do we know? Where do we see elsewhere this precedent that devarim shall live in a devarim? If it's from that which we learned as we continue to Nun Amud Aleph, the pasuk says Yakriv Oisai. So this is actually an extra pasuk, because the pasuk before already says Zachar Tamim Yakrivena. So why does it have to say Yakriv Oisai? So the extra pasuk, the Rebbe is Malamid Shekayfen Oisai. You can even force this person in order to be able to fulfill his neder. Yachal Bal Karchai. So maybe you can actually force him in some type of a physical manner. No, you can't force him. It has to be with his will. So Ketzad, you just said you can force him. So what does it mean now you can't force him? So which one is it? So it means you force the guy until he says I want. So you can keep twisting his arm until he says uncle. So therefore that's considered to be a valid carbon. So You know the guy doesn't want it. You have to force him to do it. Elolav, why is it still a good carbon? Mishum diamrin and davar shabeliv in a davar. It must be whatever he's in his heart and his mind doesn't matter. It's what he does. It's what you do that matters. Mary says that's not a raya. But Dilmashani Hasam Dianan Sahadi. Unbelievable language. Then we have testimony. We can guarantee the nichale bekapara, that this guy wants kapara. So even though he doesn't want it, the truth is he does. He wants the kapara. So the truth is his actions are not really contradicting what he really wants. Sometimes you just need a little bit of an incentive, a little bit of a push to do the right thing. So when it comes to Gittin, and freeing slaves, and he also, under certain circumstances, we can force the man or the master. Now the question again is, he doesn't want to divorce his wife or free his slave. Over there it's different. Mishum the mitzvah l'shmo divrei chachamim. It's a mitzvah to listen to the words of the chachamim. So therefore, again, obviously it's not under all circumstances, but under certain times, the chachamim have the right to be able to force you to give a get. The chachamim have a right to free your slaves, whatever that is, which is not really mentioned in this case, but it's not relevant. The point is that sometimes they tell you to do something, you have to do it, and therefore, since the Beis Din or the chachamim tell you to do something, so therefore you're supposed to listen to them. That's really what's best for you. So you have to do what's best for you. Mitzvah l'shmo divrei chachamim. El oimer Rabbi Yosef. Mihachi, coming up from here. Hamikadosh says to Isha, so you marry a woman. The Omer Kasavar he says she kohenes. I only married her because I thought she was a kohen. I didn't ask her. I always thought she was a kohenes. Or he Leviah. Leviah ben says kohenes. I thought she was a Nia v'hari hi ashir. I'm so upset. She's rich. All right. Men generally don't care about wealth of a woman like women care in the other way around. Men and women look for very different things. Ashir v'hari hi ania. I thought she was rich. It turned out she was poor. Mukadeshes, it doesn't make a difference what you think. She did not trick him. She didn't do anything wrong. It was your misunderstanding. So why do we say it's a good Kiddushin? He said, I thought. So it's obviously a raya. So no, maybe we're just going strict. What does that mean? So it says Rashi. Klarmer. It doesn't mean really they're married. It's a chomer kaimer. Get. We just want to make sure that this guy gives a get because it's very unclear. So we're going to say, okay, fine. You're married to the extent that you have to give her a get. Of a Kiddushin Gemurin, says Rashi, lo havi. It's not a real Kiddushin. Lovato Kiddushin acherim. If someone else was a Mekadisher, shal yitleisba. That if, let's say, a second guy would come and give her a get, so the second guy would also need to give a get. But if your wife receives Kiddushin from someone, it's nothing. Doesn't mean anything. It has no halakhic validity if she's 100% married to you. But since the second man would also have to give a get, clearly would be just an indicator that we're just going l'chumrah. We're not really sure. Maybe they're not married. Because maybe Devarim Shebelev is Devarim. And therefore, because of that, it's not a raya. Bekulam, in all of these cases, this is our Mishnah. And we said, on condition, that I'm a Kohen and he's really a Levi. She said, I don't care, I still want to marry you. It's not a marriage. She says clearly, in my heart, I don't care. The problem over here is since he explicitly made this condition with his mouth, she doesn't have the ability to uproot that condition. There was a condition that was made. That condition must be fulfilled. So there was this situation in the house of Rav Chisda, Bei Rav Huna, Upashtu Amaha. So this actually was presented, and he answered in the following manner. He said, based on the Gemara in Me'ilah, rather, as we talked about the din of Me'ilah, which is unusual. By Me'ilah, we say, when it comes to Ain't Shliach the Maravera, Me'ila is one of the exceptions. So if you say to a Shliach, Havile min hachaloin, give me something from a window, or min ha-deluskama, or from a basket, Rashi is a taskum, v'hevilo, and he gives it to him, Avo b'shemer bahabayis, lo hayuli belibi. Actually, I didn't want it from this pocket, I want it from another pocket. Ela alzeh, right? Ela alzeh, kivan shehavi lo mizeh. Once he gave from the one which was hektish, bal habayis moil. So the bal habayis is moil. So again, we see over here, as we mentioned before, let's see in Rashi over here, shahari also shlech shlichusai. The shliach did what he was told to do. And as it says, me'ila hashliach she'asa shlichuso habal habayis moil. That's one of the exceptions, one of the 2 or 3 exceptions of Yeshlech the Maravera. So he did the Avera, but you're the one who's moil. He did your shlichus. The question is, what do you mean he did your shlichus? How do we understand that he did your shlichus? V'mai hakam belibi. He said, I didn't. That's not what I wanted. Elulav mishum devarim shebelev in a devarim, because what he wanted was something else, but he didn't express it. He just said, yeah, go get me something from over there, and he did it. But he really had intention not to take this money, but that money from over there. Doesn't make any difference. He didn't deviate from your shlichus. He did his shlichus, and therefore you're moil. And for Tzarayah, Gemara says, well, maybe not. The dil mashani hasam, maybe it's different when it comes to me'ila. Dil mifter nafshi mekarbon kasi. Maybe the whole idea is he can't say that in my heart I remembered niskarti, and I should be putter. No, he is chayiv because devarim shebelev and devarim. So, in other words, the whole reason why maybe he said this, says Rashi, was shakuri kamashakar. He's just lying because he doesn't want to bring a carbon. This other guy, the story about the guy going to Eretz Yisrael, and he was unable to get a ticket to go to Eretz Yisrael. He couldn't get there. The borders were closed. He was not allowed to get to Israel. So it's not his fault, right? So that's different than this case, where maybe the guy's just lying in order to not bring a carbon. So Havi Lemifter Mazid. So he said, no, the truth is that was his intention, to just get out of bringing a carbon. He could have just said that it was on purpose. And we know that you don't bring a carbon b'mezid, it's only b'shaygig. And he says, no, lo avid inish, nemishavi nafshi rishia. A person's not going to just say, I was a Russia. A person doesn't label themselves as a Russia. We want to make ourselves look as good as possible. And if you make yourself look negative, no one's going to do that. So therefore, the migu, if you will, the mali l'shaker, he could have said, b'mezid ha'isi, that's not considered to be a valid migu. A person wouldn't say that. So therefore, that's not a valid claim. And therefore, instead, it must be he was maybe only saying this to pot himself from bringing a carbon. Gemara says that Havilem or Niskarti is what I said before. He should have said Niskarti, I remembered. What does that mean? As we learned, Anan Niskar Bal Habayis. Let's say the Bal Habayis remembered before this action was completed. Niskar Shliach Shliach Moil. It's very interesting. So maybe in this situation, again, he can't say that in my heart I remembered Niskarti, right? And I should be putter. No, he's chayav because devarim shebelev and devarim. So that is the idea. That he could have gotten out of it, actually. He could have said Niskarti, and that's true. He wouldn't have had to bring it. So the fact is, so we're not going to believe that, he only is saying this in order to just potter himself from a carbon, because he could have had amigo said Niskarti. And therefore, why don't we say that he should, he should be able to say, he should be potter, because he could have said Niskarti. No, Devarim should believe in Devarim. We don't care what he was thinking, and therefore he's still going to be chayiv. So that's actually the answer. Let's finish to the Mishnah. Hahu gavra de zavninhu l'nechase. Person sold his properties. Adaita l'meisek l'aradi Yisrael. Very similar to as we said before. To go to Eretz Yisrael, Solek, Vlo itdar le. He went there. He actually did go to Eretz Yisrael, but he didn't end up staying there. He ended up returning. He only went there for a short amount of time. So Merava called it Sol Kadaita Lamederhud. Anyone who goes to Eretz Yisrael, his intention is to reside there permanently. V'halo itdar. He didn't live there, and therefore, since he didn't live there, so therefore, the whole condition was again didn't take place and therefore the sale, he should be able to get his property back. You can tell me a daitel mesik. No, his intention was to go up, the Hatzalik land. He did go up, and therefore he will not get his property back. Who Gavra? There was another story of a person. The Zabninhu Nechase, he sold his possessions. A daitel mesik Eretz Yisrael to go to Israel. The slave was sulk. He never went up to Eretz Yisrael. Amar Ravashi, Eboit Sulk. If he wanted to, he could have gone. And therefore says Rashi, it's not an invalid sale. The sale is still good because he could have gone up. That's your choice. So since you could have gone up, so therefore that's not going to affect the sale. He said if you wanted to, couldn't he not have gone up? So again, there was no oinus. So my binayu, what's the difference? If there was some type of oinus, something that took place on the road, says Rashi. Shama shahayu listim b'derech. He heard that it's dangerous to travel to Eretz Yisrael. There were bandits there. According to the first language, he doesn't get to his land back, his properties. Tahachi kaimer. De'i boy lemitrach. If you were matriach a little bit, duri baser shariata, and go, let's say, with caravans, you could have taken a direct flight, could have been safer routes. Havit Solik, you could have gone. Lishna Basra, according to the second language, Shlo Hayul Shum Ikuv, there was nothing holding you back. Mashma Abel Ima Hayul Sad Ikuv, Haders Vine. However, if there would be some Sad Ikuv, any reason why you couldn't go up, even if maybe you could have figured out something else, then that would still invalidate the sale. Okay. Question 13. Mehechen lomad rabba d'dvarim shebleiv enu d'varim l'maskana, and we learn up from Me'ila. A person says to a shliach, give me something from a window or from a basket, and he does his shlichus, even though the Baal Bayis says lo hay belibi el zeh Baal Bayis moil. So that's what we see. L'maskana d'varim shebleiv enu d'varim. We learn out from the dinim of Me'ila. Okay, question TB18. He sold his properties on condition to go to Eretz Yisrael. This is the story we just had. Upirish, right? Upirish the almanas kain oisa ulbasayv lo. He didn't end up going up. Ha'im batal hamekach. So he says, im ritzono lo batal mekach. If you just didn't go yourself, that doesn't count. The sale is not batal. Im machmas oinis o ikub plukta b'gemara. So that's TB18. Very good question. So it's right what we just saw, TB18. So, and it's the ikubinayu of this yalid unsa oinsa b'urcha, whether or not, in fact, a person is able to get his property back because he could have gone, but maybe with some element of tircha. Okay, that was TB18. Okay. Right, let's see the next Mishnah. Says Mastis, a person says to his shliach, I want you to go and marry this girl for me. But complaining, and she's in Cleveland. It turns out that she was in Muncie at the time, and he was Mekadosh there, and Mekadashas. Even though it was the right girl, it doesn't matter. I said specifically Cleveland. Hari Hiba Makam Ploini. What if I just say, by the way, I'd like you to marry this girl. By the way, she's from Cleveland. And in that situation, if he's Mekadosh in Muncie, Harz Kadeshus, because he wasn't saying I want the Kiddushin to take place there. He was just saying a detail of where she's typically located, but not that it must be there. It says the Gemara, Utanan nami gabi gittin, almost the exact same thing. Harma tenu get zel ishti b'makam ploini, give my get to my wife, and here she is in Cedarhurst, v'nasnul b'makam acher, and you gave it to her in Manhattan, puzzle. Harihiba b'makam ploini, she happens to live in Cedarhurst, v'nasnul b'makam acher, but the get was given in Manhattan, kosher. So it's the same thing. So why do you need these two different cases basically saying the same thing? Yashmin Gabi Kiddushin, maybe when it comes to Kiddushin b'makom, you want to come close to this woman, you want to marry her. So b'hai asra rachmale v'loy memali mili ilui b'hai asra tsanili memali mili ilu. So I prefer, because I want you to try to persuade her I want her to be persuaded to marry me. So I want this to take place in a city where people like me. So I want the Kiddushin to take place in a vicinity where people like me, not in a place where people don't like me. And therefore, maybe that's why I was particular. You're getting rid of, divorcing anyway. Who cares? Fine, I'll divorce her in a place where everyone hates me. What's the difference? I'm not trying to persuade her to do anything anyway. I'm just giving her a get. V'yashmin gabi gerushin, when it comes to a get, b'hayas or nichle, dinivaze b'hayas or lo nichle. So when it comes to getting, you can say the other way around, that maybe you're going to choose a particular city. Says Rashi, shamagarshas ishto gnaihulo. So when you get divorced, it's a genai. It's an uncomfortable, it's an embarrassing, shameful situation. No one wants to be divorced. So therefore, maybe you're very particular of where you want the divorce to take place, so you can have that emotional support. My Kiddushin, what's the difference? She loves me. What's the difference? She's going to say yes. Says the next mustis. Marry me, I have no vows. Right? Oh wow, that's an attraction. Turns out he has a whole bunch of quirks and vows. And Mikadeshus. Kansastam. Let's say she just marries the guy not knowing about all of his hang-ups of all these Nadarim. Venimsal Nadarim. Teitze Shlubik Suva. She can say, you know what, this is not a good, I'm not interested in staying in this marriage. I don't want a guy, or a woman for that matter. This is Rashi Teitze Shlubik Suva. There were Afshi Beish and Nidranis. I don't want to be married to a woman who has tons of Nadarim, and L'chayr would be the same thing, same way around. Because basically, I want to marry you on condition that you don't have all these Nadarim, right? You have all these restrictions, right? Whatever they may be. So in that situation, it's still a marriage because you didn't make that stipulation if it was just stam, but we can understand that a person could walk out of that marriage and he would not even have to give her a ksuba in that situation. Teitzi shelo b'ksuba. Almana shein aleha mumin. Let's say he says, I don't want you to have any blemishes. So again, the case of Nadarim, I didn't say it maybe the right way. It's him saying, I don't want you, the woman, to have Nadarim. I mean, she could also make stipulations too, but this is specifically the language of the Mishnah, and also on condition that you don't have any mumin. V'nimsa bo mumin in Mikdeshas. However, Kansastam, let's say he married her in general, not thinking that she had any problems. V'nimsa bo mumin teitz shubuk suv. Again, he doesn't have to remain in that marriage. That's no chiddush. Obviously, he can always divorce his wife. The chiddush is that he doesn't have to give her a ksuba. Shechol hamumin hapoisim b'kohanim poisim b'nashim. If you study the dinim in Masechtas Bechorus about when it comes to all the different women regarding to a kohen, that will be the same as a woman. Okay, says the Gemara. The Tanan Nami Gabi Ksubas Ki Hai Gavna. This Mishnah is very similar in Masechtas Ksubas, which is good to know when you learn Masechtas Ksubas, or we already did. Like, oh yeah, this sounds familiar. So why is it mentioned the same Mishnah twice? Because Hacha Kiddushin is Tzrichale. We're learning about the name of Kiddushin. So Tana Ksuvas not the Kiddushin. Chasam Ksuvas is Tzrichale. Over there in Masechtas Ksuvas, we're talking about the dinim of when does a woman, is it Teitze with a Ksuba, without a Ksuba? So there's certain circumstances with Pritzus and all these different things over there when a woman doesn't get a Ksuba. So since it talks about ksuba over there, so Tana Kiddushin Ata Ksubas. So the truth is, you're right. You don't need to have both Mishnayos teaching, which are identical, but because it was talking about those topics, so therefore it was repeated. Or I should say it's repeated here. Says the next Mishnah. You marry two women, and you're not the most generous guy. You only give one pruta. We know you have to give one pruta to be mekadesh one woman. How about with two women? This one's pretty obvious. You mekadesh a woman less than a pruta. Let's say you send sivloinais. Rashi says daroinais. Very nice gifts. It's a nice thing that after you get engaged, you don't just stop. You just stop there. You should give your wife to be, the kala, gifts. So even though you're giving beautiful, beautiful things, and they're going to say what's worth a lot more than a pruta, that doesn't make any difference as we continue to la'achar mekan to nunam beis and mikadashis. We do not care about the fact that you gave all that money afterwards. That's not Kiddushin. Shemachmas Kiddushin Arishainim Sholach. You only gave it with the assumption that the first Kiddushin was Chal. You're not giving the Sivloinos L'Shem a new Kiddushin. So therefore, it doesn't help. V'chein katan shekidesh. So too when it comes to a katan, says Rashi, a kid who's Mekadesh, V'shach Sivloinos Mishahigdol. So let's say he's a day before he becomes a Gadol, he is Mekadesh a woman. And then after he didn't get married for a few years. Now he's 16 years old, right? 18 years old, right? And he keeps giving her gifts. It doesn't matter because the original time that he did the Kiddushin wasn't Chal. Says the Gemara. Why do you need all these three cases? Sricha. We need all of them. Diashmi'ina shava pruta. If you mention the case of giving two women a pruta, I did the kanafik memoinamine toy. The fact that he at least gave something of monetary value, we can understand where there's the potential that there would be a mistake, that he would think that it was actually a valid Kiddushin, and therefore all these gifts afterwards was not L'Shem Kiddushin. Of a Pachas M'Shever Pruta, Ima Yodeya She'en Kiddushin Taisim B'Pachas M'Shever Pruta. Doesn't everyone know that you cannot be Mekadesh a woman less than a Pruta? So it's pretty clear that he knew that was not a good Kiddushin, and therefore V'chi Kam Mishader Sivloinais. When he later sends out these gifts to her, Adayat Kiddushin Kamishadar. He's giving these gifts as Kiddushin. So he said, no. Even Pachas M'Shever Pruta, his das was on that original thing. Therefore, it's not a good Kiddushin. V'yashmin and Hanitarti Mishum Debin Pruta, Pachas M'Shever Pruta, V'kimu Inchi. We're not talking about money. We could be talking about Shava Pruta. So a person may not have the exact ability to be able to assess how much is this worth? Is this item I'm giving her a pruta, or is it a little bit less than a pruta? So therefore, it's possible that a mistake could have taken place. Of a katan, a little kid, shekidish, who marries a girl, hakol yodim shen kedusha katan klum. Everyone knows a katan has no legal ability to marry a woman. So Ema, you would maybe think, when he gets older, now he's 18, He's now giving these gifts as an 18-year-old because he wants to marry her, and these are Kiddushin gifts. Kamash Mulan, no. Itmar. Rav Huna Oimer Chayshishin L'Sivloinais. Rav Huna says we're actually afraid or concerned about these gifts. What are we so scared about? That's not what it means. Says Rashi, Misha Shidech Be'isha. Let's say you had a shidduch with a woman, and she's interested in marrying you, and you sent gifts to her. It's not now talking about our Mishnah. So you didn't do Kiddushin yet, but you gave her beautiful presents, beautiful gifts. So those sivlonos that you were giving her to try to, in the courting stage of your dating process, that could have been for Kiddushin, maybe. And therefore, if a second man is Mekadesh her, that first guy is going to have to give a get. We're concerned of these gifts. This is a question based on what we saw before. it said in our Mishnah, even after he sent gifts later in Mikdeshes. So obviously, we don't care about what the gifts are. Gifts are not the same as Kiddushin. So why are you chayshish if this guy was giving her gifts, and then second guy comes and is mekadosh her? Why should the first guy have to give her a get? You can't compare the two. Hasam over there, kidatani taima. The reason was explained. Shemachmas Kiddushin Rishonim Shalach. You have to read the rest of the Mishnah. The Mishnah says the reason why we're not concerned is because since he gave gifts, he only gave the gifts based on his Kiddushin that he himself did originally. And therefore, in his mind, those gifts were not for Kiddushin. But if he never did Kiddushin, and all he's doing is giving her gift, maybe those gifts are Kiddushin. And therefore, he should be chayshish. Egedi Army, some say it a little bit differently. How do I know that this is the din? We can actually see it from our Mishnah itself, Zariah. Shemach was Kiddushin Rishonim Shalach. Hachahu the toy. Over in that situation, since he did Kiddushin, so he can make a mistake. That it was originally good Kiddushin, and therefore his das on the Sivlonos are just nice gifts, that's it. Haba Alma have a Kiddushin. Maybe in general, those gifts are Kiddushin. Says Rashi, Hasam ketayne taimim kedushi kamoy v'samach alayhu yisamach on it. Abel hay deloy kiddush equal mecha shel hachi. V'abaya loma boy kamer. Abaya says it's the loma boy. What's that? Loma boy ba'alma. In general, where no Kiddushin was done before, do nachas l'tayus Kiddushin klal. There was no Torah's Kiddushin at all, right? There was no element or conversation about Kiddushin. Our mission is a chiddush is a feel hacha to nachas l'toras Kiddushin, even though it wasn't done properly. But at least there was a discussion, there was an attempt of Kiddushin. So ema havi Kiddushin. So now you would think maybe the sivlonos are Kiddushin kamashmon. So in other words, he's actually saying no, we shouldn't be chayshish of sivlonos. Our mission is not a raya, pum fakert. Our mission is a loma boy, because certainly if there was no conversation about marriage and you're just a nice guy, you decide to give your girlfriend some nice gift, right? You paid for dinner, right? Which is certainly a sheva pruta. Right? You give her a box of chocolates or some flowers. That doesn't mean you're doing it with Shem Kiddushin. However, our Mishnah, where there was Kiddushin involved, even though it was an incorrect Kiddushin, so maybe those Sivoinais in that situation will work. Kamashmal, they don't. So my hablo, what exactly is the maskana? What is the outcome? So Amar Papa ba'atra de mekadshe v'hader misavle chayshinan. It depends on the custom of your city. If you're in a place where people are generally mekadesh and then only afterwards giving gifts, then you should be chayshish. Because if this guy's giving a gift, why is he giving a gift? Maybe it's because of Kiddushin. However, if it's not, then not. So misavle v'hader mekadshe loy chayshinan. If a guy did generally in the city, which is the typical situation, certainly in the United States or modern dating, is where masabli v'had mekadshe. A guy who gives a woman a gift on the fourth date, that's not l'shem Kiddushin. He's only doing it because he's expressing some admiration or, again, courting this woman. But it doesn't mean that he actually is being mekadosh her yet. So therefore, not chayish. Mora says, well, mekadshe v'had masabli b'shita. If you're dealing in a situation where Kiddushin always takes place and no one ever gives gifts, so the fact that there's a gift, that should be something to be concerned about, right? It's pretty obvious. So tzricha, now it means deruba mekadshe v'had masabli. It's only that the majority of people do this. However, there is a miyuta masabli v'had mekadshe. Some people do it the other way around. Mahu detema nechash miyuta. Maybe we should be chayshish on the minority, kamashmon or not. Bamini Rav Acha bar Rav Huna Rabba. Huchsik stark suba b'shuk mahu. What is this talking about? It says Rashi, Shiro stark suba. You actually saw a star of a ksuba in the marketplace. Mahu, says Rashi, im niskan shel acher mahu. Let's say she got married to someone else. What is the din? L'hachzika kimukadeshes l'rishon. The fact there is a ksuba that we found in the street, is that enough of a raya that she was actually married to this original guy? Just because you found some star, that's already going to make her into an Eishes Ish? Maybe the guy just wrote a star. He may have just written a shtar ksuba, but he never gave it to her, never married her, didn't do anything. Maybe the guy just write a ksuba, and that's it. Doesn't mean that he actually was married to her. So why would you think she's nation? So might have a law. So what's the din when it comes to that? So Ravashi, again, it depends on the city. In a city in which where you first do the Kiddushin, and then you write a ksuba or a concern, because why is there a ksuba here? Probably there was a Kiddushin before. However, in a situation where people write ksubas and then only afterwards do Kiddushin, we're not chayish because maybe they just didn't get married. So pshita. So if you're in a situation where people get married and then they write a ksuba, then obviously the fact you see a ksuba should be enough of a reason to assume that they're married. It's possible that you're in a town where it's hard to find a sofer. It's possible, says Rashi, even though normally you do Kiddushin and a ksuba, but if, let's say, you live in this tiny one-horse town and a sofer happens to come once a year, and you say, you know what, I'm planning on getting married in 6 months. Can you come for my wedding? No. Could you write a ksuba for me? Okay, fine. So he writes the ksuba, even though the Kiddushin didn't take place yet. So maybe we should be chayish of that situation, Kamash or not. Question 14. Fine. Question 14. Isha shiro shtar ksuba al shema. Let's say a woman finds or sees a shtar ksuba with her name. Are we concerned that he was mekadosh her latzricha get that she'll need a get? So as we saw in the Gemara, b'makam shemakdishin v'achaf kaisin ksuba chayshishin. If they first get married, then the ksuba is written, then we are chayshish. But makam shekaisin v'achaf mekadosh in the chayshin. However, the other way around, if they normally write a ksuba and then they do Kiddushin, so the fact that there's a ksuba written, that doesn't mean anything. It's no raya that they're actually married. And this may be the same as TA 17. Let's see what this question is. So again, identical question. That was TA 17. Let's see the Mishnah and maybe a few lines of this next Gemara. Okay, so the next Masnisin says as follows: Hamakadish Isha Ubita, a person who marries both a woman and her daughter. Now, you can marry a woman and you can marry a daughter, her daughter, but you can't marry both. You can't be married to an Isha and Ubita because that becomes Araba. You can't marry the Araba of your wife. O Isha v'chaisa, you marry your wife and her sister. You cannot marry your wife's sister while your wife is still alive. If your wife dies, that's an exception, as we saw in Yevamos elsewhere in Torah, that you could, but not while they're alive. And not only that, it's ka'achas. You marry them both at the same time. Now, each one on its own would be a Kiddushin. If you married one zach or zeh, if you will, the first one would work, the second one obviously wouldn't. But what if you do it at the same time? In Kedushes, we say it's not going to be a good Kiddushin. You don't, and therefore says Rashi, get. Neither of them need a get. It's nothing. There's no chash. There's nothing to be concerned of at all. Umasa, and then the Mishnah tells us a little story. B'chamish noshim, there's 5 women. Uvehem shtei achayos, and there was 2 of them were sisters. B'likad echad adam echad kalkol shel te'enim. He took this bundle of te'enim, really a romantic guy, a bunch of figs. V'sholehen haisa, it belonged to them. V'shol shvias haisa, and it happened to be during the Shemitah year. We're going to discuss why is mentioned these details. V'yamar hari kulchem mekudeshesli b'kol zu. I want all of you to be married to me with this bundle. V'kibel achs mehen ali kul, and one of the women accepted this bundle of figs on behalf of all the 5 women. The sisters are not married. Now, that's possible to mean, we'll have to understand this more in tomorrow's daf, that the other 3 are married to him, but not the 2 sisters. Okay. And maybe that's again a raya, that again, if you try to marry 2 sisters, it's not a good Kiddushin. Here it's a little bit different because you had 5 women at the same time. And the Gemara is going to discuss this in tomorrow's daf. Min hanimili. So says the Gemara, Min hanimili, how do we know that this Kiddushin would not work if you were Mekadosh them at the same time? So Omer Rami bar Chama. So Rami bar Chama says, never call the pasuk says, Isha el chaysa lo sikach. A woman, her sister, you cannot take. You cannot have her with sror as rivals, as co-wives. You cannot have 2 wives in which they're sisters. The time in which they're co-wives, it's not a marriage, even with one of them. In other words, basically what it's trying to tell us is that if you were Mekadosh both of them at the same time, you're not married to either. So Rabbi, if that's the case, when the pasuk says with regard to the Isser of marrying 2 sisters, that there's a punishment of kares. So Kiddushin lo tafsiba. If it's not a good Kiddushin, you're not married to either of them. Kares mi mechayev. So they're penuyas. So if you have tashmish with a penuya, that's not an Isser kares. So how do we understand these psukim? You're telling me it's a case that it's not a Kiddushin, so it's not a Kiddushin, there shouldn't be any kares. El Omer Rava, instead of the words of Rami bar Chama, here's Rava, Kra Bezach Zeh. The pasuk is actually talking about you marry one woman and then you marry the second one. The second one is not a good marriage. If you marry a sister, you can't a girl, you can't marry her sister. That's what it's telling you. And if you do, and you have tashmish with her, there's an Isser kares. That must be what the psukim are talking about. Bezach Zeh. Umasnisin. So how come? What is our mission talking about? Why is it not a good Kiddushin if you marry them at the same time? So it's based on the Sfar, which we're going to discuss at great length tomorrow. Rabba, the Yomer Rabba said, not Rabba, Rabba, if it doesn't work one after the other, it cannot work at the same time. Essentially, you cannot be Mekadosh a woman to a sister and a woman and her sister, a woman and her daughter at the same time, or bezach or zeh, I should say. You can't marry one and then marry the second one. The second one will be typhus. So if you do both at the same time, that also will not be a good Kiddushin. Ad kan.